Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's session, Solving Three Critical Warehousing Challenges, presented by Simwell, a CITT endorsed business partner. This webinar will walk through three critical warehousing challenges and how simulation and digital twin technologies can provide practical solutions. Today's industry's experts are Sylvain Gassel, Director of Business Development at Simwell, Marcus Grimm, B2B Marketing Strategist and Chief Marketing Officer, and Anna Camphouse, Director of Simulation. As usual, this session is being recorded, and by attending, you consent to being recorded. You can use the chat function at the bottom to leave your questions or raise your hand, and I can call on you to unmute. We're going to have a few polls running through the session today, and there will be a quick survey at the end of the session. If you're having any audio issues, please exit and rejoin. That usually clears things up. Marcus, over to you.
Terrific. Hey, Tracy, thank you for that introduction. I think I speak for everyone when I say we need more theme music in webinars. That was kind of fun. Myself and the team we're having a good time for this one. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Today, we're going to be talking about solving three critical warehousing challenges. Obviously, there's a lot more than three of them out there, but we all have a relatively short lunch hour. So we're going to be talking about three of them today, specifically about how simulation helps warehousing leaders navigate tariffs. Yes, we'll be talking about it. How can we not talk about it right now? Demand volatility and automation. Tracy already went through a bunch of the housekeeping here, but yes, this is being recorded. Yes, you'll get the slides. We've got some polls, and obviously we'd love for you to participate. Matter of fact, we've got one coming up in just under 30 seconds here. There will be a survey at the end. Please participate in that as well. And as always, keep those questions coming in. Depending on the question, we'll either take them right when they come in, or we will definitely be saving them to the end as needed. So, obligatory slide about who in the world is Simwell. If you're not familiar, Simwell at a glance. We are, in fact, a decision intelligence company. We are a provider of both software and services for optimization, simulation, and digital twins. We operate in many industry verticals, including warehousing, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So when we talk about simulation, optimization, digital twins, that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So I'd like to help my speakers today get calibrated. So the first question we have, Tracy, if we can fire up this one, is let's talk about you. Please tell us about your specific experience with simulation. Tracy, go ahead and share the poll here, and we'll see in a minute what we're looking at. As those answers come in, we already have a comment in from somebody for the theme music. They want Bob Seger. I can't disagree. That sounds like a great option there. Tracy, what can we see here? Can we have some results from the poll?
Yes. Oh, it's not visible. Just we're getting some more answers in, but
okay, that's fine.
82% minimal experience.
82% minimal experience. That's great. We've got that tells us all we need to know for today's presentation. And in fact, you are in the right place. So we're going to have a lot of fun today with this one. Absolutely. So that being said, let me introduce my panelists so you can hopefully we can get you from that 84% to at least that you've got a little bit more experience. So first off, I'd like to introduce Anna Camphouse. Anna is the Director of Simulation at Simwell, where she helps global organizations improve decision-making through advanced simulation, optimization, and yes, I said it again, digital twin solutions. She's got a background in industrial engineering and mathematics. Anna has led complex initiatives in warehouse automation, manufacturing optimization, Internet of Things deployments, and plant-level digital twins. Hey, here's a fun fact. She began her career as a math teacher before transitioning into industry. Well, Anna, we are so grateful you made the switch. You've been working in simulation with a high degree of specializing in warehouses for years. I personally feel like it was just a few years ago we got past the major COVID disruptions, and now businesses are knee-deep in another phase of a reinvention, if you will. So, you know, there's a lot going on in the space right now where simulation can really help. Is that fair?
I would say so. The good thing about simulation, it's a really good tool for understanding uncertainty, and we certainly have some uncertainty at this point in time.
Yes, yes. May you be blessed to live in interesting times, as the saying goes. I'm also joined today by Sylvain Gazai. Sylvain is the Director of Business Development at Simwell, where he helps organizations tackle complex supply chain and logistics challenges, also through advanced simulation. He brings over 30 years, folks, of experience from the Royal Canadian Air Force, where he led global transport aircraft maintenance and negotiated multi-billion deals in service support contracts. So if you're dealing with big contracts, Sylvain's your guy. He holds a master's in systems engineering with a specialization in integrated logistics systems, along with a certificate in modeling and simulation. Sylvain, what we're talking about today, these three main challenges, I think it's fair to call them a global issue, but it's not just global, it's profoundly local. How so, sir?
Well, at this point in time, for multiple reasons, right? But I'm going to focus on three key reasons. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, if you take a look at the picture on the right there, this is a 1/50th of Toronto zoomed in, and all you see are warehouses to warehouses to warehouses. Toronto, like Vancouver, Savannah, Phoenix, is a major supply chain and logistics hub with thousands of warehouses. Uh, from a modeling simulation perspective, it is still a very much untapped market. So the potential to help and make a significant difference is huge, especially at the mid to big size industry. So second reason, well, the timing is right. Market disruptions are at its historical peak. The introduction of automation is shocking the world right now. It is knocking at the door, and customers must address these new realities. And lastly, with modeling simulation, you can actually compare strategic level decisions. You can run as many scenarios as you want, all of which in a risk-free environment. And I lied, Marcus, I've got a fourth reason. This webinar actually aligns with CITT's conference coming up in Toronto, the 4th of 6th of June. It's a perfect time to meet some of you. We can schedule some B2B meetings. I can visit you on site. For those that are outside the GTA area, we can even conduct some online meetings.
That's a great introduction. Sylvain would love to meet with all of you. And I think Sylvain brings up a great point relative to the last poll that we discussed, where 84% of you acknowledged, hey, simulation really is on our radar. We're not looking at it. And we've got some examples here, just profound examples of how it really can help you negotiate these very complex times that we're in. So now we're going to actually just dive into what those three different challenges are. And for each of these, we're going to ask you a setup question, asking you, how prevalent is this in your world right now? How much sleep are you losing over this? And then Anna's going to come back and she's going to talk to us about, okay, so if that's a problem or a challenge that you're dealing with, here's why it's a challenge. And here's how you can maybe think about plugging in simulation to help that particular one. So let's get into the first one. And folks, this is sort of a softball question for you. What impact are recent tariff developments having on your operation? I'm super curious to see the answer on this one. Matter of fact, while those votes come in, I'm going to put Anna on the spot because she was a math teacher. Anna, we have our number one choice is significant disruption. You're a math teacher and you also are a simulation professional. Do you want to hazard a guess at what percentage we'll get of significant disruption?
I don't know, let's say 10%.
Anna's going with 10%. Sylvain, my friend, you've got a thought on this one before we see the results?
No, based on the first poll question, I agree with Anna. I would say probably low in terms of significant disruption, but trust me, they are coming. If they haven't hit you yet, they will.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Tracy, what's the data tell us? What are we looking at here? And look at that. We have 13%. See, never bet against the math teacher, folks. 13% significant disruption and little to no impact, 27%. And good for you. And as Sylvain said, obviously it depends on your business. Has it not happened yet? Or maybe just the offering that you have, it won't be impacting it. But that tells us a lot. So obviously, we take a look at that 60% number in the middle. We've got some moderate impact. And then we've got significant impact, so another 13%. So now we're going to talk about, so assuming you're one of those people with those challenges, exactly how, in fact, can tariffs be understood better through the use of simulation? Anna, we've all been operating under a certain set of rules as related to international commerce for quite some time, but now those rules have changed a little bit. And talk to us about what that means.
So I think one of the things to keep in mind with what a simulation is and what it can really do for you is it gives you a digital representation of your system. That could be a warehouse like the four walls, or it could be your supply chain network. And so when we're talking about like a simulation of your supply chain network, that's going to allow you to input these new rules. So now there's tariffs in effect that's going to affect your costs differently going from one location to another. But you can put those into your simulation and kind of play around with what the impact is going to be if you choose one thing over another to help address that in a no risk environment. So I think that's really how simulation is going to help you with this.
Now, one of the things that we asked the poll question, right? 84% of this of the audience says they're relatively unfamiliar with simulation. 13% of the audience said they're extremely impacted by tariffs. So now let's talk about what might be happening in organizations where we're not doing simulation, but we do see significant disruption. How are those executives typically negotiating the tariff news right now? What's it look like?
I mean, there's a lot of smart people in those positions, right? And they have a lot of good experience. So it's usually a lot of meetings to try and figure out what are we going to do? What happens if we do this? Sometimes it's just experimentation in the real world, which can get kind of costly, or, spreadsheet analysis, which I do love a good spreadsheet, but it's hard to really get your arms around the variability that happens within a real world network. So I think simulation can be really helpful.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. So you talk about how it's operating in a lot of companies without simulation. So now let's paint a rosier picture. What does it look like in other organizations right now?
So I love this video because this is a great example of like a network simulation where you're understanding like, where do I put the different nodes? And now when we're talking about tariffs, we can understand if we put a node in one country, what's the cost impact to now having to travel across that particular border. You can understand like where maybe you should keep your inventory. It gives you a lot of data around what if scenarios and lets you ask those questions of like, what if we tried this, or what if we did this? And it gives you a tool in your tool belt to think about these things before they happen, and so that you're ready to respond instead of trying to play catch up when something does actually happen.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And because this audience, Anna, is very new to simulation, just describe exactly what we're seeing here. This is an output after all the hard work has been done, right? What are we seeing on the screen here exactly?
So this is a model of a particular supply chain network. You're going to have the different nodes from your suppliers. They might be, from your own company, or maybe they're outside suppliers. You're going to have the different routes following actual roads, understanding the different types of shipping that's happening between those locations. So it's going to play this out over real time, and you can experiment with this. You could test it 100 different ways so that you can see. I think at one point it showed the graph there. You can kind of see like what happens to our inventory, what happens to our costs as we look at different points in time.
Excellent. Really well said. Now, it's interesting to me when you talk about tariffs, because obviously tariffs, it's an operational challenge, but at a certain level, it's also a strategic challenge, and it could impact CapEx and things like that. So Sylvain, two things stand out to me. The first being that we can often look at simulation for both strategic and operational. And the second thing is, without a tool like this, these things are really difficult to really navigate and discuss. So Sylvain, what are some key insights that we can share as it relates to simulation and the use of tariffs?
Yeah, well, for me, I mean, tariffs are disrupting the entire global supply chain, like no questions asked, right? So whether you're talking about your supply sources that you need to reconsider, importations perhaps, you're shifting demands that are now highly unpredictable. right? This week alone, Subaru decided they will close all production in North America, and they're not alone. Multiple companies are exploring those options right now. So instead of using spreadsheets, which are a really good start, I agree with Anna, you can now test millions of potential scenarios very, very quickly using simulation. So to survive, in my opinion, you must be ahead of the game. And with predictive modeling simulation, you can be. We're talking about strategic and expensive capital decisions here. With a simulation model, you can test those scenarios, those multiple in a risk-free environment. You can even do some sensitivity analysis, like what if the tariffs are 10%, 50%? What if they're 145%, right? Does my decision stand? Should I change my approach? So those tools will allow you to test all of the above in a much faster time than calculating stuff by hand in a non-stochastic environment.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, the Subaru example, that's spot on, right? If we all saw what Subaru did this week, they decided that they're going to shut down factories in one country, move them to another country. Those are big decisions. And as we talk about that, how did those decisions get made? Well, somebody could have just made a gut decision. Somebody could have fired up an amazingly complex spreadsheet that I don't think I could wrap my head around. Or you could plug that all into simulation. And that goes back to the Subaru executives to be able to say, okay, based on the simulation, here's really the way we think this is going to play out in the real world. So thank you for sharing with that, Sylvain.
Yeah, and to me, Marcus, like with modeling simulation, you know what the answer will be before it happens, right? And when it happens, you know what to do.
Yeah, really, really well said. So yes, so tariffs are something that probably not a surprise to anyone on this show, but a lot of people who are talking to Simwell right now, that's what they're saying. How do we navigate this world? Let's talk about something that is probably a little bit more traditional. We weren't all talking about tariffs 24/7 until several months ago. But let's just talk about a more standard use case for simulation, which is the idea of planning for demand, which brings us to our next poll today. So how significantly in your world do fluctuations in demand currently impact your warehouse operations? And again, when we ask this particular question, it could be because of tariffs, or it could be for other reasons that we're going to talk about in a few minutes here about how volatility, it can be certainly a key impact for all of us. But in general, when you think about your warehouses and you talk about demand going up, going down, is it as easy as can be, and your warehouse traffic is predictable as it relates to demand, or is there a lot of variability that's sometimes hard to wrap your arms around? What are we showing here, Tracy?
Answers are still coming in.
They're still coming in. I love that. Yeah, the Subaru example was a fascinating one for this week, and it really is a great example that it's hard for me to imagine. These are multi-billion-dollar decisions, right? It's hard to imagine that those things probably did not happen without some level of simulation. We'll talk about how to decide, if your project is big enough to warrant simulation or not. I think in a case like Subaru, I don't know anything about what happened at Subaru this week, but I'm going to guess there probably was simulation involved with it to make a big decision like that. Okay, let's talk about volatility demand here. 12% of you, major impact, and that makes a lot of sense, right? 35% of moderate impact, 53% minimal impact, no significant issues. So, and I'm sure you've seen this before, situations where we don't have a lot of volatility and situations where we do. What are some of the reasons we tend to have volatility?
I feel like in most businesses, there's usually some kind of volatility or at least variation. And some of this is going to be things that you expect. There's seasonality. You need to hold inventory ahead of Christmas, or, you have things coming up that you're able to plan for. And this is something that you've seen before. You have a summer high or a winter low, just depends on the business that you're in. And then there's things that kind of happen out of left field, like COVID, that you're not planning for. But I can tell you, some of the customers that I worked with that had their supply chains already modeled when COVID hit were in much better situations than people who were like kind of scrambling to get all that together as they were trying to deal with like what happens when an entire port shut down for X amount of time. And now I'm not getting goods for like weeks. And then there's like smaller level things as well too that I think are really interesting, like from an operational standpoint. So if you're looking within like your daily execution in the four walls, you know, maybe the Super Bowl was yesterday and 5 people called off. So you have a plan of stuff you need to get out the door today. How are you going to execute that plan with the people that you have? And one of the cool things with a simulation when we talk about like digital twin, it goes more into that side of things where it's like, here's my operations as they stand. What do I have as ops manager? What levers do I have that I can pull today? How can I rearrange my schedule so that we're able to still execute at the same service level for our customers on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And Anna, we've tossed out this word a couple times, digital twin. So for the benefit of the audience, when we think about simulation, simulation is how we can predict an alternative future tomorrow. With that digital twin level, Anna, we're actually bringing in live data. So that's the key difference between simulation and digital twin. Am I saying that correctly, or how would you refine what I just said?
That's correct. I feel like digital twins like a fun word right now, or has been for a little while, but they're somewhat similar, simulation and digital twin, but in the sense that we think about it, a digital twin is going to be when you have a digital model of something that's connected to your real-time data. So maybe it's connected to your ERP or your WMS, and you're getting that live feedback. And the cool thing with that, or I mean, I think it's cool, is that you are able to then do some predictive forecasting with that live data to say, okay, here's how we've been going today. What's it going to look like at the end of the shift? What's it going to look like at the end of the week? You don't have to, wait till you get to the end of the week and then look back and say, how did we do? You can kind of look ahead and do that forecasting.
Yeah, that's really, really well said. And when we talk about demand volatility, and I loved your point about it is whenever we talk about demand, like we always have to talk about the other side of the coin, which is supply. So if you've got a demand to ship so much product, you need to make sure you've got the supply of labor to actually do it as well. So really, really well said. So now we've talked about some of the reasons that we see those challenges with demand volatility. How can simulation actually help us get ahead of it instead of always feeling like we're reacting to it?
There's a lot of different things that you can do with the simulation. There's always different, it depends on like what's the key impact to your business at any point in time. But the nice thing is it lets you test in a no risk environment. It helps you like play around with things before you move a large piece of equipment or before you relocate a factory in another country. You can kind of play that out on a computer without having to do that in the real world. It also lets you play around with your layout. Maybe you're thinking about shifting which dock doors you're using for inbound and outbound, or maybe you want to you're thinking about, busting a hole and adding a couple more. What's that going to do for you? It lets you play around with it. It also lets you test things and have like a risk mitigation plan in place. So I know we kind of talked about that with tariffs, but just with anything that is going to impact your business, you can play with this on your computer ahead of time. And then I think Sylvain mentioned something that I wanted to say again, sensitivity analysis. And what a sensitivity analysis is when you're looking at, okay, I'm making a prediction. How long is that prediction good for? How far can I stretch this before everything that I've been doing is not going to work anymore? Like how much more throughput can we get out of here by adding another person, and when do we need to add 2 more people, or when is there going to be a diminishing cost of returns because we've added people but we don't have the work for them to do, we don't have the right amount of equipment for them to use.
Right. Really, really well said. Sylvain, you actually have a great story about demand volatility, and I just share it with the group that we have here.
Oh, absolutely. No, this is a very personal story, a frustration of my life in the military. But our uniform provider, when I was in, had huge inventory issues. I mean, if you're a boot size 9 like me, and I'm going to use the boot as one example, but it could have been anything that fits me, right? A boot size 9 is pretty common. Lots of people wanting boot size 9. Well, they were always out of stock. Versus my 6'7" friend with size 14, 250 pairs in inventory, right? So at the end of the day, when I first joined Simwell about 5 years ago, my very first project was working with that specific provider. And to me, it's like unsatisfied clients means you may lose the business in the future. Inventory means money, sitting on the shelf, right? So their initial solution was very simple and very traditional. It's like, if we increase warehouse capacity, store more boot size 9, we're going to solve the problem. Well, guess what? Yes, you will, and Sylvain's going to be happy. Having said that, you may not win the contract because now you've got CapEx and OpEx costs that are unnecessary costs that may lead you to lose that bid. So what we did with them is we actually helped them by building an integrated model, a digital twin, with an inventory optimization algorithm. So we essentially plugged that AI brain to actually go and take a look at past seasonal demand, right? Establishing a depletion rate at each SKU level for each item. We also use that AI brain to consider suppliers' replenishment lead time. And in some cases, it actually led to them considering supplier changes. You know, if certain suppliers are not good enough, why not considering other suppliers in that case for the customer to be happy? And how about considering future forecasting demand based on attrition and recruitment plans? If the Canadian forces in that case intend to increase their force by 20%, guess what? They're going to need more boot size 9, N14, N10, and everywhere, right? And again, let's run some sensitivity analysis. What if we're wrong by 5%, 10%, 25%? Where's the breaking point here? Do we still have a very good, solid solution? And last but not least, but very importantly, advanced capacity planning. If you want to increase your warehousing size, because every business wants to grow, right? But how much do you need to grow? And at which point are you going to need money to grow? And money doesn't grow in trees either. So it's going to take a while. So if you can predict when your growth is, you can actually work on your budget planning in advance to secure that money for when you need it to be able to secure your additional capacity that you need.
That's a really great story, Sylvain, and thank you for sharing it. And I think what I really liked about that particular story is you sort of brought us through 5 or 6 use cases. And then at the end of this presentation, we're going to talk about, should you be thinking about simulation or not? And maybe if you've only got one of these use cases and the risk is pretty small, maybe not. But if Sylvain was ticking off those 5, 6 use cases and you're like, we've got that, we've got that, we've got that, you're starting to kind of see here, okay, so maybe this is something that would be something for us to consider. Let's go on to the third topic here, which is automation. And I think automation is a fascinating one for anyone in warehousing, right? Because there's no shortage of automation alternatives. Companies that are willing to come in, give you great ideas, really radically change how you're approaching warehouse operations. And of course, Sylvain said it, money doesn't grow on trees, and these tend not to be free solutions. So there's a lot of cost implicated with them. So our final question for this group today is, how aggressively are you pursuing warehouse automation, which is our final topic for today? And again, our options here are going to be, we are highly advanced, moderately integrated, minimal, or just exploring options. That'll just help us set the stage here for our final topic. And Sylvain, you're a size 9, so as we wait for the votes to come in, it's one of the reasons why when we go into shoe stores, right, it's generally the ones on display are a size 9, because I believe it is the most popular size. But as you point out, it's not without its challenges, right?
Absolutely.
Yes. As a proud 10.5 over here, I can't empathize with your problem, but
well, I'd like to be a 10.5 and a few inches taller, but that's not the case.
Outstanding. Tracy, how are we looking on this one? There we go. Let's see what we have here. Yes, 18% already highly automated, 71% minimal or perhaps just exploring, and 12 in the middle. So automation, yes, it is real. The promise of it is absolutely real, but 71% of you either haven't found a need to pull the trigger, or you've held back on it because, let's face it, Anna, challenges do exist, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great automation options out there, but even thinking like more simplistically of like maybe you want to change up the racking in your building. So understanding like what should you buy and how is that going to help you? Um, I the automation partners we've worked with have been really great and they have some really cutting edge solutions. One thing I've seen though from other clients that have come to us is that, you know, the thing that's being solved for is in isolation. It's like, how can we make this part of the warehouse work better? But it kind of ignores or oversimplifies the other portions. And so you're not really seeing like the system level impact of what it is that you're buying. And then I think the other thing is like, obviously, when you're designing these things, you have to make some assumptions, but the real world ultimately ends up being a lot messier than some of the assumptions that you're going to make. So the thing with simulation over like just looking at your average throughput for different areas is you can look at the variability of what happens across the system of the warehouse or of your multiple warehouses. So you can see like, what if we have lows everywhere? What if we have peaks everywhere in demand and activity? So it's really understanding like what kind of volumes you can support. And then the other thing I've seen is like if you have volumes that are too low in some cases, automation solutions don't always work as well. And so it's really getting back to that sensitivity and understanding like where do we break it and like where does it operate ideally.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. Oftentimes we talk about automation and everyone wisely gets excited about how automation scales up, but sometimes when you're scaling down is actually where things can break. So it's a really great point. So in a scenario like that, then that's the challenge that we have with automation. I mean, what's the promise? Where can simulation make the biggest difference?
There's a couple of different places we usually get called in when someone's doing an automation project. Ideally, we're going to come in before anything gets purchased, and so we're going to be able to look at the pieces of equipment that are under consideration, see how that, analyze the other pieces of your business and understand how those all fit together to be able to run experiments kind of around those scenarios of like peak demand, low demand, demand 10 years from now to understand like how long is this, when are we going to need to make another investment in the future? Um, so we can test the actual equipment and then we can also look at how does it play a part with the system as a whole. The other time that we get called in, and I always feel kind of bad for these calls, but it's like after the solution's been implemented and maybe it's not working right, and then it's like, okay, something's wrong here. This is a complicated thing that we have now. Let's try and model it on the computer to see if we can identify what's going on. So that is still a useful time to do simulation because the nice thing about simulation is it really takes the emotion out of things. Like it's a mathematical calculation at the end of the day. It's not necessarily an opinion. So it gives you that data to really make a decision about what's happening and what to do next. And it takes a little bit of the emotion out of it for people.
That's really, really well said. And please, as we're heading down to the final few slides here, please keep those questions coming in. We're going to have opportunity to have Sylvain and Anna answer all of them, which I'm really looking forward to. So as we wrap up into this, Anna, you've seen a lot of automation projects, both good and bad. We've got some, we call them Anna's observations, patterns or pitfalls to avoid if you're looking at something like this. So how should we think about it?
I mean, it's always great if we're talking about automation, let's look at it before it gets installed, before you start, you know, attaching things into the building. Um, it can be very difficult to debug things after the fact if you don't have a simulation, just because there ends up being so many different moving pieces. And then the other nice thing that I've seen is that you get a chance to look at this beforehand, before it's put into play, and it's going to give you that, again, the ability to experiment and play around with things in a digital and no risk environment versus trying to, talk through it as it's happening.
One of the things you shared with me, Anna, when we were preparing for this webinar was the idea that this last slide can almost come off as, we're checking or we're policing the automation company. But the way you had described it to me was very different in terms of the automation companies often like if they're getting help from a simulation company, because at the end of the day, they do want you to get the maximum throughput, the maximum efficiency you can. However, oftentimes, the devil is in the details. And that's where Simwell can kind of go on and say, okay, well, here's exactly how we deploy this in a way that really provides the customer with a lot of benefits. So you mentioned to me that like we love to work with those automation companies because they tend to see us as part of the solution, not just pointing out why the automation didn't go as well as they had hoped, right?
Absolutely. And I think another thing to consider is like when you're getting a large piece of automation and maybe you haven't done anything like that before, there's going to be new operational policies and ways that you're going to handle your picking capabilities and your slotting that might be something you hadn't thought about before. And so it really, we can really help bridge that gap between like the pure automation and the like we have to actually get stuff out the door every single day or bring things in the door every single day and talk through again before everything goes live what are those like operational policies going to really be to
Yeah.
get to actually run the business.
And if I may, Marcus, I would just like to add quickly that for some of our clients, because here we're talking about more comparing different vendors, vendor machines and the integration of such technologies into existing or new capabilities. But for some of our clients, we've been able to establish warehousing robot traffic priorities and policies. Like as an example, who gets to go first when two robots are facing each other and one needs to, is it the client that paid extra for the same day shipment? You can test this in the environment. Or as I mentioned before, predicting expensive expansion plan for budget planning reasons, like avoiding costly over designs, buying more robots than you need. Those robots are not cheap, right? They will return. There's a return on investment, but you don't want more to buy more than you need. Or under design, even worse. Now you can't meet your demand, right? You want to meet your demand. You don't want Sylvain as a military being unhappy because I don't have my size 9 available, right? Or boost your confidence level with decision making. Essentially, hey, we made the right decision. This alone is worth the investment as well.
That's really well said, Sylvain. And we're heading here to the final couple slides, and I think we had our three big reasons today. You're impacted by tariffs, you're impacted by demand volatility, or you're interested in automation. Sylvain's also given us like 10 other reasons that you might want to consider automation or simulation. But Sylvain, obviously, you've learned through the years that some clients are an ideal fit for simulation, some are not. So what are some of the key things you look at when someone comes to Simwell and asks if we can help?
It's essentially focusing on the challenge at hand. Like the first step is what is preventing you right now from achieving your objectives, and you start with that challenge, and then it's essentially you got to focus on high stakes like big capital complex problems, something that you don't have visibility into it and you want to gain more visibility. You're looking at multiple teams, multiple workflows being affected as well. So if it's very, very simple, simulation can help you, but you can probably get by without a complex, more expensive simulation model. However, most operations out there are very complex, and the uncertainty of what's happening in the world right now, running different what if scenarios to make those decisions. It is vital to have those not as expensive tools that will have a significant return on investment and it allow your organization to make those changes. But focus on your challenge is the key.
I think that's really well said. And again, it's interesting. Even in this presentation, we've talked about tariffs, we've talked about demand volatility, and we've talked about automation. I would not be surprised if some of the people on this call are dealing with all three right now. And that's where you get into those too many what ifs that you can't even decide with confidence. So for the audience that we have here today, Sylvain, if they're feeling like these are the types of benefits that they're looking for, what does Simwell suggest as next steps?
So as a next step, essentially, it's give me a shout, send me an email, and what we'll do is we'll coordinate a discovery call. I want to know about those challenges and what you're facing, and every client is slightly different as well. So it's not like we're not in a realm of, hey, we sell you a software, just implement that software and it's going to resolve all of your problems? No. Yes, there are commonalities between different warehousing organizations, but there's a lot of uniqueness, and everybody's got different challenges to address as well. So give us a call, okay, and we can take a look at it together.
That's
And we can help you solve your problem with the tools that we can provide you with.
outstanding. On the screen right now, we actually have a resource we'll be sending to everyone who joins us today, which is 24 questions to ask before investing in simulation. Sylvain's actually been addressing all these. What are these big decisions that we're trying to face? Is there significant cost, risk, or visibility involved? Those are sort of the questions that you can begin to just ask yourself, okay, is there a potential fit here or not? And obviously, Sylvain would love to talk to you and as you go through those questions yourself. So, hey, listen, I want to wrap up where we are on this one. I can't thank Sylvain and Anna enough. They have been so much fun today, as I knew they would be. They always are. But we've talked about these three issues. We've talked about tariffs, demand volatility, and of course, automation. We've gotten some great tips here. Look, we're trying to avoid over design and underperformance. If you spend $2 billion or $2 million for automation, or $2 billion rather, we want to make sure that you get the proper ROI on that. We want to replace that gut feel so that you're not just doing something because you think it makes sense. And obviously, we want to help you build confidence in those complex environments. Let's move on to the Q&A. And for the group that's out there, what are the most challenging questions you'd like to answer with simulation? What's prevented you from exploring simulation? Here's your opportunity to ask us some questions. Do we have any, Tracy?
Yes, I actually have one that you guys sparked while you were discussing this. After implementing your systems, how do you assist your clients in optimizing the correct processes before they understood the system? Basically, what is the learning curve of using these systems?
That's great. Anna, do you want to take that and maybe through the lens of how Simwell thinks about the MVP process?
Sure. So as we're building these solutions, the thing that we would never want to do is like go away for a few months and then come back and say, here you go. All right, bye. We try to do these in coordination with your team where everyone's involved all the way through to make sure that we're always addressing the top issues at hand. And then usually towards the end of it, there's going to be a training, there's going to be a handoff so that everybody can understand how to fully utilize this tool going forward. And then, of course, we are always available to answer questions after the fact. So
Wonderful.
How
Perhaps,
long is the training usually?
oh, it depends. It depends on the complexity, but typically a handoff training is not going to take more than like an hour or so.
Oh,
Usually it's pretty short, and we'll let everybody play around with it, then come back and do follow up as necessary. But we try to make these very user friendly, and because we're kind of interacting with the team throughout the process, there's not a lot of surprises when we get to the end.
wonderful. Sorry, Sylvain, you were.
no, I was just going to add that maybe we want to touch base very quickly on, we follow a hybrid agile methodology to building our models as well. So we build them incrementally. So although a model might look complicated when you look at the end results, when you build the model incrementally with the team, actually with the client, it's not as if anything comes as a surprise and suddenly poof, here's your super complex solutions and good luck. So it's iterative. It includes customer feedback, and I mean there are some online courses available that you can take on a monthly basis, or we can provide your team with some tailor-made training to your specific needs as well.
Wonderful, thank you. I have another question here. When a warehouse team comes to you with demand swings, what's the first thing you look for to know if automation will assist them?
I can take this one, I guess. I figured the pause there was you guys waiting for me to do
That's
that.
exactly what that was.
I think so. The way I like to start off anything like that is to get a lay of the land, get a sense of what's going on, where, and where the mins and maxes are of what's happening. So I like to take a look at data, whatever data exists. Sometimes it doesn't. So then in that case, we would go ahead and do like interviews with staff to understand like what they're feeling on a daily basis. but it's going to be process review as well. The nice thing about simulation is that if you can describe your process, maybe you don't have it mapped out in a nice little flow yet, that's okay. But if you can describe it, we can model it. And then once we're able to see it within the model, you can really kind of start to pinpoint where you're seeing some problems.
That's really well said, Anna. We mentioned earlier our guide. We're going to be sending people the 24 questions to ask, and that's actually some of them. Is the idea: how well are your processes documented? How clean is your data? And obviously that's a whole topic that we're not going to go into today. But asking those questions about processes and data, seeing are you really ready to figure out something with simulation?
Yeah, and I would add, like, don't be turned off if you're worried, like, oh, our data is just not good enough. There's usually a lot of information that we can find in that. The thing that I love about progress over the last like 10 years is we've just gotten more and more data, and there's so many insights to be found just from that initial analysis before we even get to putting it into a model. It can be extremely valuable.
That's really well said. We found a lot of great ways to clean up unstructured or messy data.
Yep.
Tracy, what else do we have?
Well, speaking of data, how do you protect against breaches, any cyber attacks, data leaks? That's a big one that, of course, with any type of automation, people are always worried.
So I will take this one because with all of our bigger clients, we actually operate in their environment. So data never leaves their environment. We do have a cloud system that can provide, if the clients don't have those available, we can provide a solution. But I would say I have not encountered a client yet that doesn't want to keep the data close to heart. So what we do is we implement our solutions within the client's environment, and therefore the data is protected and never leaves the client's organization. Anna, I don't know if you want to add to this or.
No, I think that sums it up.
Okay.
Thank you. How easily does your system integrate with other warehousing softwares that may be required to upkeep the operations?
Fairly simply, like one of our softwares of choice is called AnyLogic. Although we're fairly software agnostic, we use this one a lot just because it has so much flexibility. But it's a Java-based thing, which maybe that's more information than the people on this call want. But essentially what that means is there's a lot of Java applications out there. But on the other side of that, there's most applications have things exposed for you to either get data out of or to talk to automatically, called APIs. So we can interact with those very easily. And then if maybe you don't want us connecting directly to your system, because I have definitely come across that, and having lived managing things, I totally understand why you wouldn't want to do that from a IT perspective. Pulling in large amounts of data, whether that's manually or automatically, is totally doable with the different systems that we have. And we have the capability to do that, and we have the capability to do it quickly because we have a good system in place.
Thank you. Anything else said? My last question here is, of course, about the workforce transition. Every time someone hears something about automation, they think that machines are going to replace humans. So how can you, I guess, alleviate someone concerned that your system is there to help and not replace them?
Anna, let's let Marcus answer this one.
Oh, okay.
So I'd actually love to take a crack at this one, and then Anna can technically fix me as she's welcome to. I think things that are happening with AI are so fascinating, but to me, the magic of model building that Simwell provides, so much of it is happening at the front end where you're asking the right questions, where you're making sure the processes are established right. I don't think we're in a place right now where AI can succinctly figure out that human piece of it. Operating at scale, I think large language models are doing incredible work. And I think that, like everyone, we're leaning into those tools. But it feels to me like the front end of figuring out how to build that model it feels very much to me like a human job, at least for the next several years. Anna, would you agree, or you can disagree with me?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the other thing that I was going to say was that the tool that we're building is for making decisions, and we fully expect humans to be making those decisions. So it's meant to complement a job, not replace a job.
Yeah, really well said. We did get a tactical question in here. You mentioned any logic software, different software that we can use to run simulation, and a lot of these, a lot of these softwares you can download a free version. Do this though, Anna. Help the viewers understand. Here's what's going to happen if you download a free version of this software. Here's what you'll be able to do. Here's where you won't be able to do. And so here's where you would maybe bring in SimWell. Just talk about what that looks like from a user perspective.
Yeah, sure. So there's, I think a lot of what I've been talking about would be classified as discrete event simulation, if you want to Google that one, looking for, as you're looking for software, but it'll let you do, a small number of things. At some point, you're gonna get to the situation where there's something more complex that you're trying to do. And one of the things, I mean, I've been working in simulation every single day for over a decade, so it's very quick for me to know what to do where and how to make those things happen. But if you're not in it every day, it's kind of like a muscle, if you're not exercising it, you lose what you've learned. And it does take a little while to kind of get some depth. So when you do hit kind of that wall, that would be the time to call SimWell, I guess. We work with people at a variety of levels of experience with simulation. Sometimes it's, they want to be able to build up that capability within their team. And so we're doing coaching, or maybe we're doing like side-by-side development with them to kind of really like do hands-on coaching of like, here's how you develop a model. This is the way you might do some programming to do that. Or it's more of like a turnkey kind of situation where they're like, this is the problem we're trying to solve. Help us do that. And then we'll, take a look at that and say, okay, here's how simulation can help. Here's maybe you don't need a simulation. Maybe you need something else like machine learning or some other advanced analytics technique that we also do. So there usually comes a point when you get to an advanced level where it's like, oh, I need a little bit more help here, or maybe this is more than I have time to commit to. So that might, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, really well said.
Okay. Thank you everyone for your time. We're gonna end here. Really appreciate it, and thank you all for the questions and being here today. Sylvain will be at our conference this June here in Toronto, and I hope to see everyone else there. We do have space available still if you would like to register. The room block is almost sold out, so don't miss out on that one because it does expire May 6th if you need a spot. Coming from out of town. Thank you, Sylvain, Marcus, and Anna, and I hope everyone has a very lovely Wednesday.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you to everyone on the CITT team. This has been a wonderful event, and we wish you all the best in June.
Thank you.